What's going on, everyone? Yesterday, the NBA released the 2022-2023 NBA schedule, and the NBA also highlighted some dates. And I wanted to break down all the things that the NBA highlighted for the upcoming season, as well as go over the Eastern and Western conferences and rivalry week and stuff like that, and hear your thoughts and opinions. So make sure you join the discussion down in the comment section below. Let's dive right into it. Now, the 2022 Election Day is a day that the NBA highlighted. On Monday, November 7th, all 30 teams will play the day before Election Day and encourage fans to make a plan to vote. No games have been scheduled on Election Day, Tuesday, November 8th. So Election Day is November 8th this year, and the NBA has been on the movement to try to get people and encourage people to vote. And we've seen the numbers really translate well, right? So understand why they would be trying to do the 2022 Election Day sort of promotion. Next up, you have the NBA Rivals Week. Classic and budding rivalries between teams and players will highlight NBA Rivals Week during the week of January 23rd. So that should be a big week. All the teams and the rival teams, which I will show in a moment. I will break down those teams and those games as well. NBA Rivals Week will feature 11 nationally televised games across 4 networks: TNT, ESPN, ABC, and NBA TV, over 5 days from Tuesday, January 24th to Saturday, January 28th. So they are making this like a huge sort of deal, huge sort of breakdown of like, hey, look, all these teams throughout the history of the NBA, right? The NBA is trying to get into these rivalry things that, like, college football does and promotes and things along those lines. We've seen other sports kind of have like, really the prime time. These two teams have historically hated each other. Let's, highlight that for entertainment. And so it makes sense. Matchups: Boston, Miami, Clippers, Lakers, Denver, Philly, Memphis, Golden State, Charlotte, Chicago, Dallas, Phoenix, Memphis, Minnesota, Toronto, Golden State, Denver, Philly, New York, Brooklyn, and LA, Boston. So you got a couple different LA games, a couple different Boston games, stuff like that. Again, we'll break that down a little more in a moment. And then the travel reduction. Estimated travel has been reduced to 41,000 miles per team, a record low in the era with 30 teams and 82 games per team. Estimated travel has been reduced by a total of more than 50,000 miles from last season, nearly 2,000 miles per team. Instances with no travel between games for teams on the road have increased by 66% from the last season, 88 from 53. So the NBA is trying to, not like, the big thing is like, should the NBA cut down on travel and games, right? Instead of 82 games, cut it down to like, 71 games or something like that to really help teams, lessen the back-to-back games, things along those lines. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of like, hey, this needs to change. So instead of losing those 82 games and kind of, because the NBA, they want that revenue, they want the money, you lose those games, it affects the teams and the arenas and the TV deals. It affects everything. So the NBA doesn't want to get rid of, the games or cut back on games entirely. So they're trying to find other ways to kind of meet in the middle, right? Okay, well, instead of cutting back on the games, let's make traveling easier. Let's, cut back on the miles that you have to travel. Let's kind of schedule things accordingly. So that way you're not putting as much wear and tear, not as many back-to-backs, things along those lines, which I think is a huge step in the positive direction. Now, getting into Rivals Week, again, you have the Celtics and you have the Heat, Clippers and the Lakers, Nets versus the Sixers, Grizzlies versus the Warriors, Bulls versus the Hornets, Suns versus the Mavs, Timberwolves versus the Grizzlies, Raptors versus the Warriors, Nuggets versus the Sixers, Knicks versus the Nets, and Lakers versus Celtics. Personally, I don't think all of these are rivalry games. I think some of these are just kind of like, hey, let's, these two teams have had some good playoff matches, or, they've had moments in the past. Obviously, like Lakers, Clippers, rivalry game, right? The two LA teams, New York and the Knicks, right? There you go. You got the Knicks and the Nets, rivalry teams. Lakers, Celtics, historically the biggest rivalry in the entire NBA and the league history, and arguably sports in general. But outside of that, like, Raptors and Warriors, are they really a rivalry? Yeah, the Raptors beat the Warriors, but like, it took the entire Warriors team falling apart for that to happen. So does that really count? Nuggets and Sixers, like, how many games have they historically, gone at it? Nets and Sixers, okay, I can kind of see that a little more. It makes a little more sense, especially back in like the New Jersey days. things along those lines. Grizzlies versus Warriors. That's something, again, it's like, okay, yeah, is that really a rivalry? Like, they played each other, last season in the playoffs. It was a great series, but I wouldn't classify that as a rivalry. Celtics Heat, okay, I can understand, especially like with LeBron, the big 3 days. You had the Celtics big three. They were going at it. Celtics, are just, you can make an argument, have a rivalry with every team. So, okay, that makes a little more sense to me. But like beyond that, like Timberwolves and Grizzlies, like, is that really a rivalry? Like, maybe because you got Ja Morant versus, Anthony Edwards. Okay. Like, I can see that. Like, all these matchups, I am all for these matchups. I love these matchups. But, are they really rivals? I don't know. Or maybe some of these teams, they're trying to kind of keep together to like, oh, hey, let's start these rivalries, right? And then you have these same group of teams playing each other every rivals week, and it becomes a new thing. It's a new promotion. It's a new sort of thought process. Okay, I can understand that. And of course, let me know your thoughts. Do you agree with that? Do you not? Let me know down in the comment section below. But moving on I wanted to kind of break down the Eastern Conference teams and kind of think about what teams do I think are going to make the playoffs. Personally, I think the Milwaukee Bucks are the best team in the East still. I think that they have the most likelihood of coming out the East. I think that they would have came out the East last year if Chris Middleton didn't get hurt. But nonetheless, Boston was able to do it. I do think Boston upgraded their team. I think Boston is going to be a lot better, and the experience is really going to help that team. Problem is like, what's going to happen? Are they going to get Kevin Durant? Are they not? Will there be turmoil if they don't get Kevin Durant? Same thing with the Nets. Like, when it comes to the Nets, like, what's their team going to look like? Are they going to have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving? Are they both going to get traded? Even if they don't get traded, do they play? Does Ben Simmons play, right? There's so many unknowns and mysteries when it comes to the Nets. Now, if everybody buys in and everybody is 100% and health and all is right in the world for the Brooklyn Nets, then I think you can make the argument they're the best team in the Eastern Conference. It's one of those things. It's like, much like the Clippers, where it's like, I can't believe in you until you show me that I can. It's like every year the Nets are the favorite, and it's like they're going to do that, and they've won one playoff series since this team got Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Like, I just can't buy into you. Every year you're the favorite to win the championship, and you can't get out of the second round. So it's like, okay. Now, moving on to like other teams, I think Miami takes a huge step back. I think at worst case scenario, Miami is like the 6th seed. I just think, you have, if the Nets are all bought in, Nets, Bucks, you got the Celtics, the Sixers, I think, depending on what James Harden you get. I think James Harden and Joel Embiid is a better Sixers team than Miami is currently constructed. And then, I could see, maybe one of these young teams like Chicago, maybe Cleveland, Toronto, Atlanta, one of them kind of being that team that just is the surprise. You always have that surprise team, a young team that's just lighting it up, and you're just like, wow, where did they come from? I could see one of them. And so that would make Miami the 6th seed. I think, best case, they're like the 4 or 5 seed. I just think that a lot of their issues they had last year are still issues this year. And beyond that, I just think that they're a year older. Are they going to really be trying to kill themselves over an 82-game season? Or are they going to look at it as like, hey, let's just get into the playoffs? It's an interesting conundrum, I guess. And then the Sixers, it depends on what James Harden are you getting. If you're getting Houston James Harden, then, you're talking a legit contender. You're talking a team that could be absolutely terrifying. What is Maxey going to look like? Is he going to take a step up? I don't know. The James Harden we saw last year was not the James Harden that I think can help this team get to the promised land. I think they'll still be really good. I just don't think that they're going to be, a legit contender. Even if they're like the number 1 seed, depending on what James Harden we get, I don't think that they're a legit contender. And what is he going to look like in the playoffs? Is he going to be the James Harden of the past, or is he going to be a new changed man that's a man on a mission trying to prove something? I think Sixers are in the argument. I think Boston, the Sixers, the Nets, depending on what goes on with Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons, and Kevin Durant, and the Bucks, those are the 4 teams that are battling to come out of the Eastern Conference. I think outside of that, you got a bunch of teams like sort of in the middle. I think Miami, I think Atlanta, depending on how Trae Young and how DeJounte Murray kind of shape up. They were in the Eastern Conference Finals 2 seasons ago and didn't even make the playoffs, right? So it's like, what team are we going to see this year with them? But at Chicago, again, I think that they're a middle of the pack team. I don't think that they're like a legit contender. Cleveland, Toronto, same thing. Again, these are just my thoughts and opinions. Knicks, I don't think even with Jalen Brunson, even if Jalen Brunson is the Jalen Brunson that we saw in the playoffs, I still don't think that I think that they're a play-in team. But, what Julius Randle are we going to get? Are we going to get a Julius Randle from last season that was one of the worst players in the league production-wise? Or is he going to be the guy from 2 seasons ago that was one of the best? Shot 40% from 3, was a nearly triple-double guy every night. I think depending on how that shapes up could really dictate their standings. Washington, I think, they're a bottom of the pack team, but you never know. Hornets, I think they're going to be a mess and a lot of questions. Orlando, I am really excited, and Detroit, I am really excited to see. Those 2 teams, I think, have a ton of young talent and could be very exciting to watch. And I wouldn't be surprised if they sneak into the playoffs. I think worst case, they are a play-in team. I think both of those teams are very young, very talented. And a fun little note is Orlando for a month stretch. I think it was the month of January or February. They were the number 1 defensive team in the entire league for the entire month. So if they can kind of get that production out of this team next season, they could be pretty good. So I wouldn't be shocked if they're in, they're like the Cavaliers of last year. I'm curious to see if the Cavaliers take a step forward or a step back. We see that a lot. There's a lot of, young, up-and-coming teams. They just kind of overachieve. I mean, look at Atlanta, right? They were in the Eastern Conference Finals and didn't even, they were just a bottom-feeding team by the time all was said and done. Is Cleveland going to be that team this year? There's a lot going on with this team. I think the Pacers are probably at the bottom amongst this. I think the Pacers and the Hornets are they're at the bottom of the Eastern standings for me, just based on this. I think Orlando has more overall talent. I think Detroit has more overall talent. And then I think all the other teams are middle of the pack teams or legit contenders. So I think the Pacers and the Hornets are going to have the toughest time trying to put together wins. But again, those are my thoughts, and let me know yours in the comment section. And then moving on to the Western Conference. This is going to be an absolute juggernaut. I think that the Western Conference is going to be a dogfight, and it's going to be just crazy to see. I really feel like the back half of the Eastern Conference teams really fall off drastically outside of the top 4 or 5 teams, where you can make an argument for several teams in the Western Conference. I mean, the Suns, the Clippers, you have Golden State, obviously. Denver's going to be so much better. The Minnesota Timberwolves, what are they going to look like? The Pelicans, what is Zion going to look like? I mean, all of these teams, I think, could all be teams that you could make an argument for being in the Western Conference Finals. Grizzlies were, in many people's eyes, right there last year. I think if we're going on order, just on paper, I think the Clippers are the best team in the Western Conference. Front to back, depth, coaching, star talent, all of that. But like I said with the Nets, I just can't believe in you until you prove me otherwise. Can they stay healthy? Can they not blow 3-1 leads? Can they, actually get out of the second round? All of those questions are real questions, legit questions. And I just think the Clippers look fantastic on paper. They're a little small. They're kind of lacking at the center position. But, I could see them signing a center or something like that. There are still some centers out there in free agency. The NBA is just kind of on standstill right now because of Kevin Durant situation. But the Clippers, I think, again, on paper, they look like the best team. But you have the Warriors that just won the NBA championship. They have a lot of decision-making to make. But I think they at least get through this year before they make those decisions. And the Warriors, I wouldn't be shocked if they win it again this year. They still have the talent. They're still deep. They have a lot of young guys. James Wiseman's coming back. Kuminga, Moses Moody. A lot of these guys are going to be years better. Jordan Poole, Andrew Wiggins. We saw he was, their second best player in the playoffs. So I think that they're going to be terrifying. The Jazz very likely are tanking with or without Donovan Mitchell. I don't think that they're a legit playoff team. And I think that they're if they have Donovan Mitchell, I think they're fighting for a play-in. I think without Donovan Mitchell, which I think most likely is going to be the case, he ends up getting traded. And, Jazz is basically tanking. Same thing with the Spurs. I think they're the two easy teams that you can kind of rule out and just say, hey, Houston, the Jazz, and the Spurs, I think are going to be the three teams at the bottom of the totem pole. OKC, depending on how their young talent is, OKC is a big question mark for me. I think it goes either way. I think they're either fourth from last, third from last, or they are in the play-in conversation. Maybe they don't make the play-in. Maybe they're the 11th seed or something like that, but it's close. I think OKC could go either way. I think they're a really fun, exciting team. Sacramento, I don't think they're a legit lock play-in playoff team, but I do think they're good enough to get into the play-in. And I think the Sacramento Kings, worst case scenario, are going to be a ton of fun to watch. They have quite a team that they've put together that is really young, really fun, really talented. And I think in 3 to 5 years, they could be a legit in the conversation for maybe best team in the West. Because a lot of these teams are only getting older. The Warriors, what are they going to look like post Steph and Clay? The Phoenix Suns, what are they going to look like post, Chris Paul, stuff like that. Clippers, same thing too. They got a pretty veteran team over there. So I could see Sacramento moving up the ladder here, and I wouldn't be shocked if they end their playoff drought. I think that they're going to be a tough out, worst case scenario. Dallas, I think, is super underrated as far as their pickups. I think Christian Wood is going to be huge for Dallas. I think JaVale McGee is a super underrated signing once again. I think that I wouldn't be shocked that they're back in the Western Conference Finals. I don't think that they're a legit contender, if I'm being honest. Not yet, but depending on how it all gets put together, I think that they could be in the conversation. I wouldn't be shocked if they are one of the higher seeded teams come playoff time. I just think, I think the Warriors, the Clippers, depending on what the Suns do, which we'll touch on next, I think that they might be better. I think there's still 3 or 4 teams better than the Dallas Mavericks. And I know Dallas beat Phoenix, but there was a lot going on with them. But jumping into Phoenix, I think Phoenix goes either way. I think they are either great this year and they are up there as the conversation for best team in the West, or they take a huge step back. Because a lot of the issues they had, and one of the reasons they just got destroyed by Dallas, outside of Dallas just shooting the lights out, was all the locker room drama that was going on with DeAndre Ayton, him literally refusing to go back in the game and play and quitting on the team. Now you hear all the reports about Jay Crowder. So that locker room could implode. On top of that, Chris Paul's only getting older, and it's not like he's had the best injury history. And Devin Booker. There's a lot of questions. People hyped up Devin Booker like he's, comparing him to Kobe, and he's the best, shooting guard in the league and all that stuff. And he just did not show up. So I think that there are a lot of questions when it comes to Phoenix. And I do think that it really could go either way. I wouldn't be surprised if Phoenix drops, to the 5th or 6th seed. I really wouldn't. And I know people might think that's crazy, but they're a veteran team. They're a team that it has a lot of things going on behind the scenes. You have teams like Minnesota that have something to prove, New Orleans that have something to prove, Dallas that has something to prove. And I think that they're going to be trying to do whatever it takes to win those 82 games, where Phoenix, they just need to be healthy and get into the playoffs. And I think that that's a big difference. Now, moving on to the Denver Nuggets, I think that the Denver Nuggets could be one of the better teams. Now, what's going on with Michael Porter Jr.? How is he going to come back into form since the injury? But they made some nice deals. They got Brown. They got KCP, right? I think that those were huge underrated moves for defensive purposes, guys that can knock down threes. That will really help because one of the Denver's big issues was defense, especially around the perimeter last year. If Joker's going to be Joker, MVP level player, and then what is Murray going to look like? Is Jamal Murray going to come in and get back right into the swing of things? Is he going to regress a little bit? I think that there are some mysteries with Denver, and it's a tough position to put them in. Now, I'm sure Denver fans think that they are going to be one of the best, if not the best team in the Western Conference. But in reality, there are a lot of questions around this team, especially around your stars. So If everyone's healthy and everyone is great, then yes, I think they are up there as one of the better teams. I think that they're going to be a tough out. I think that they win a bunch of games. I think they're, very well could be like a 3 seed, maybe a 2 seed. Maybe they come out and try to prove something, and try to go for that 1 seed. I wouldn't shock me at all. So I definitely think Denver is up there. I just have my concerns. I really do. Now, the Minnesota Timberwolves, when it comes to Minnesota, I don't think the Rudy trade is as big of a deal as some might think. I don't think he moves the needle that much. I think this team is going to be really good, but I think a lot of it is going to rest on Anthony Edwards. Can Anthony Edwards take the next step? Because he's the guy that has the most potential and growth. What is this team going to look like, I think, is on his shoulders. Also, how is the Rudy fit going to work? Is Rudy going to be able to work well next to Cat? Rudy had issues in Utah about touches. And he was like the number 2 guy. So what's going to happen when he's now like the number 5 guy on the team? Is he going to be okay with just, getting rebounds and putbacks and maybe, getting lob passes here and there and going games without maybe a single field goal and stuff? I don't know. I think that that's a big concern there as well. Will the 2 bigs work out? It's a lot that the Timberwolves invested into him. And I just don't think he's a needle mover enough. Are they going to be able to play him at the end of games, with his free throw shooting? I just think the Timberwolves have the potential to be very good. I think their inexperience is going to be bad. Karl Anthony Towns, I'm sorry, but makes the most boneheaded plays and is one of the most lowest IQ basketball players in the NBA. Seriously, I don't know how you can watch that playoff series and think otherwise. Seriously, he was atrocious, but he's had a history of that. Like, it's not like it was just, a bad stretch or a bad game or two or something like that. We've seen some of the greatest players ever have just bad moments, bad, stretches, whatever. No, he's done this for pretty much his whole career. Just, bad decision making, just worse timing for things like turnovers, just throwing the ball completely out of bounds, like just not making the right reads or the right plays. I don't know. I have concerns that this team is too young to really take a step. And I think by the time they get there, it's very likely Rudy Gobert is edged out. Like, he's not even a part of the team. So I don't really understand the Rudy trade. I think that they were better off keeping the team that they got now and just kind of continuing and letting them grow and build, unless you could get like a star. Like, just for example, like let's say, like I would have rather them went and got a Donovan Mitchell, or something along those lines, where like at least he's a bigger impact guy. You don't have to, he's not a liability in any manners. Yeah, your defense probably still terrible, but how much better is your defense with just adding Rudy Gobert? Like, it's the Jazz all over again. I just don't think that I think that they have a lot more potential than the Jazz, but we saw the Jazz with, Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, and, every year was their year, and they just weren't able to get over the hump. So, again, a lot of concerns with Minnesota, but I do think that they have potential. New Orleans. New Orleans is my, sleeper team, and I think it depends on Zion. Now, CJ McCollum has shown he is probably the best 2 in the league. And I'm not talking about 2 guard. I'm talking about, second option in the entire league. Brandon Ingram, I think, is going to take the next step, and he's going to be a guy that can kind of be a little better than he was last year. I don't necessarily think he's going to be top 5 in the league or anything like that, but I do think he improves just because he's young and he has room to grow. And then Zion. If Zion can get back to being that dominant force Zion we saw pre-injury, I think the Pelicans could be terrifying. I think that they could be a team that is very difficult to beat, very just talented, and it's going to be very challenging. But can Zion stay healthy for an 82-game season and get into the playoffs healthy? That's a big concern, because I think without Zion, or even if they have Zion, but he's not playing at that elite level that we saw, I don't think the Pelicans are a serious threat to anybody. But those 3 of Zion, BI, and CJ, I think that that's a pretty good big 3. And I think that they are talented enough, young enough, skilled enough to cause some troubles. I don't think that they're like a legit contender,
But I could see them being the Dallas Mavericks of last year, where nobody thought that they were going to, advance past the second round, and all of a sudden they're in the Western Conference Finals. I could see the Pelicans being that team. Depending on the matchups and teams that they play and stuff like that, I wouldn't be shocked at all if, we're looking and it's like, the Pelicans are in the Western Conference Finals. I could legit see that happening. I just think that they have all the talent in the world. I just think that they're young, a lot of questions. Zion, how is that going to work? Will their big three even work together? Because now CJ goes from being the ultimate 2 to the number 3. I don't know. There are a lot of questions with them, but I'm definitely excited for them. And then Portland, I just don't think they have enough to be a real threat. I think that, their best case scenario fighting for a play-in spot. I just think there are far too many teams better than Portland. Damian had a bad year last year, although, injuries, stuff like that. So maybe he can kind of pick it back up. But I don't really think Portland's going to make much noise. I think Portland's going to be, they're not going to be bad enough to tank, but they're going to be bad enough to where they're not going to be a legit team. Maybe they can squeeze into the play-in. That's something that could, maybe that is a conversation. But I think even if they get in the play-in, I don't think they're good enough to beat the other teams that'll be in the play-in to end up making it to the playoffs. So I think best case scenario, they're a play-in team. And then last but not least, the Los Angeles Lakers, right? Reason I saved them for last is because, one, there's still a lot of questions. What trade are they going to make? Are they going to get Kyrie Irving? If they get Kyrie Irving, then I think they're arguably the best or one of the best teams in the Western Conference. If they get Miles Turner and Buddy Hield, I think that they are a Sherlock play-in team. I think they're like a 5 or 6 seed. But what is that going to look like? What is that makeup going to look like? Now, the team currently constructed, I think their ceiling is a 6 seed. I think realistically they're probably a play-in team. Now, dominant MVP level Anthony Davis and LeBron James being LeBron James, maybe if Darvin Ham can just get a serviceable Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook doesn't have to be a superstar. He doesn't have to be a triple-double night in and night out. But the numbers Westbrook averaged last year, which was 18, 7, and 7, but it was terribly inefficient and was just not a very good, it was just not productive. If he could get to that but productive, and Darvin Ham can get Russell Westbrook to average, 15, even just 15, 5, and 5, I think the Lakers have a lot of potential, and I think that they could be a team that nobody wants to face. Question is, can Darvin Ham make that happen? What are the other guys going to look like? I just think the Lakers have too much mystery to know where they're going to be. What if Kendrick Nunn gets back to being that 20-point-a-game guy and is just like the Lakers' Kyrie Light, and he's just killing teams, and he's shooting 38% from 3, and they have their big 3 and Nunn, LeBron, and Davis, and he's just a monster, and he's a guy that's not afraid of the big moment. I mean, he was averaging 20 in the NBA Finals against the Lakers. So, what if he's that guy? What if Walker turns out to be a better Malik Monk? Nobody thought Malik Monk was going to be better, as good as he was for the Lakers last year. The difference is that Walker is a bigger player, more athletic, longer wingspan at 6'10", and is a good defensive player. What if he's like a 15-point-a-game guy that can play some solid defense? And the Lakers have 3 or 4 guys that could really step up. All of these guys, yes, they shoot slightly at league average or lightly below league average. They're all 34 to 35% three-point shooters. But they've also never played on teams with a guy like LeBron James, Russell Westbrook, and Anthony Davis. So their three-point percentage, you'd imagine, will go up slightly. So what if this team is a 36 to 37% three-point shooting team, which is slightly above league average, and they actually play defense. They're young, they're athletic. You got an MVP level Anthony Davis. You got a dominant LeBron James. You got a serviceable Russell Westbrook. And let's say Kendrick Nunn gets back to being that Kendrick Nunn. That's a solid team. Are they a contender? I don't know. I just don't think you can ever rule out LeBron and Anthony Davis. But I think their ceiling is a 6 or 5 seed. But I think realistically, there's too many things that have to go right for the Lakers to be that 5 or 6 seed, and I just don't know if they get there. Kind of like what I was saying with the Clippers, until you can show me and get me to believe, I think that's an issue. Now, the Lakers also have a very tough schedule starting the season. They have one of, if not the toughest schedule to begin the season this year. And in October and in February are some of the toughest stretches out of any team. And so if you're not subscribed to my Lakers channel, I'll link it down in the description below. Go do that because I am going to break down the Lakers schedule independently. But that's my problem, is that they could start the season 0-6. Seriously, their first 6 games are against like legit playoff, maybe even arguably contending teams. And if the Lakers are, 1-5 or like 2-3 or 2-4 or something like that, it's not a good look. So I think the beginning of the season is going to tell us a lot. But those are my thoughts and opinions. And as always, I pass the question on to you. Let me know yours down in the comment section below. What do you think is going to be the upcoming season? Are you excited for it? Are you not? What team do you think is the surprise team? What team do you think is the sleeper team? What team do you think is the ones that are coming out of the East and the West? Do you agree with my breakdowns? Do you agree with my opinions? How do you feel about it? I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions down in.
One last little shameless plug is I did start As It Stands Lakers. It is a channel just like this, dedicated to only the Lakers, because the Lakers are my favorite team. And on this channel, As It Stands, I talk about all teams, all sports, stuff like that. We have football season coming up, so I'm definitely looking forward to that as well. And I just wanted to make a dedicated channel to the Lakers to give the ins and outs. Now, all the big stuff, all the big news and stuff, I will still post here on this channel. But if you want all the ins and outs and just rumors and theories and just discussions just strictly on the Lakers, link down in the description or in the comment section. Go check out the channel, subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. That being said, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Lets me know you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button, followed by the bell notification. Stay up to date with all things sports. Join this wonderful community and all of our discussions. I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you.